The strange city. Rose loved exploring new places. As a travel writer, it was her job to visit destinations around the world and share her experiences. So when she read about an unusual city online, she knew she had to check it out. Little information was available about the place, which made it all the more intriguing. Rose booked a flight and soon found herself arriving late one night. After collecting her bags, Rose went outside to catch a taxi. But to her surprise, no other people were around and the city outside looked empty. Tall, dark buildings loomed in the darkness. Not a single light could be seen glowing from any windows. An eerie fog filled the silent streets. "Hello?" Rose called, but no answer came. A strange unease grew in her mind as she realized no taxis or cars were waiting. It was like the city had been abandoned. Just then, distant lights appeared through the fog. A lone taxi pulled up and the driver stared out, expressionless. "Get in," he said in a flat tone before Rose could speak. She obeyed, wondering what was wrong with this place. The car swerved through the empty roads, passing dark alleys and boarded-up shops. Finally, they arrived at a tall, empty hotel. Its lobby was dimly lit with a man behind the front desk. He scowled as Rose paid, handing over a creaky room key. She took the rusty elevator up, wanting to leave but unsure where else to go in this strange city. In her room, Rose locked the doors and windows tight. Sleep was difficult due to noises outside, whispers in the darkness, footsteps running by then ceasing. The more she thought about the city's strange atmosphere, the more scared Rose became. By dawn, exhaustion took over and she drifted into an uneasy sleep. Rose was awakened by a loud banging downstairs. Still frightened from the night, she peered through her locked door's peephole. A group of people were gathering at the entrance, pulling luggage behind them emotionlessly like zombies. They filed onto the elevator in silence. Rose realized these must be other guests like her. Going down to the lobby, she observed the new arrivals checking in without a word. Were these the only residents left? The taxi driver and man at the desk barely reacted to anything. The foggy world outside looked as empty as before. Deciding to get answers, Rose walked down the first street after getting some breakfast from the empty hotel kitchen. She passed huge gloomy office buildings, boarded storefronts and abandoned cars blocking the roads. Not a living soul could be seen or heard anywhere. As Rose turned a corner, she spotted something strange. A flickering red light was flashing through the fog from an alley ahead. Cautiously getting closer, she peeked inside to investigate. A lone restaurant had its neon open sign pulsing in a kitchen window. Could someone alive be in there? Rose entered slowly, hearing noises from the back. "Hello," she called out nervously. An old man emerged from the steamy kitchen, staring ahead with no expression. He placed a plate of eggs and toast on the counter without a word. Rose took a seat on a squeaky stool, eating while observing her strange company. The cook moved robotically, chopping vegetables with heavy hands. He never made eye contact or spoke even once. It was as if his mind had left his body behind. Finishing her quiet meal, Rose tried asking what happened to the people here. The cook stopped working briefly before resuming without giving an answer. She asked more questions but received only silence in return. Deciding this place held too many secrets, Rose hurried out into the dense gray morning. The rest of the day was spent exploring the empty streets to find some answers. As she walked for hours through the endless fog, Rose felt like she was in some kind of post-apocalyptic ghost town. But all the shops and houses looked newly abandoned, with no signs of destruction or decay anywhere. Just when hope was fading, Rose spotted what appeared to be a park through the haze. Rushing over, she entered a gray wooded area filled with dying trees and dead bushes. The only splash of color were dozens of red roses wilting on naked vines. A figure could be seen in the distance, crouched between the thorny stems. "Excuse me, can you help me?" Rose called out hopefully. The person stood and turned slowly, revealing an old woman in a stained dress. She stared blankly with pale eyes surrounded by deep wrinkles. Rose took a step back, now nervous about this strange place's only other resident. "Do you know what happened here?" she asked cautiously. A long minute passed before the woman replied in a whispery voice. "The fog, it took them all away. Now only ghosts remain in the gray city." With that cryptic message, the woman turned and shuffled deeper into the brush, vanishing like a ghost herself. Rose was left alone again with more questions than answers about the fate of this city and its missing people. Clearly she had to get to the bottom of this disturbing mystery before it was too late. That night, Rose could barely sleep while thinking of escape plans. She needed to find some answers to understand this strange situation. At dawn, as the fog swirled thick outside, a plan came to her. Using the abandoned electronics store as her base, Rose gathered batteries, wire and alarms to help protect herself. Her search would begin by exploring the tallest empty skyscraper near the hotel, hoping its high views could spot clues. Rose packed supplies and went to the dark structure, taking the broken elevator up broken floors. Everything was coated in years of dust except for a clear set of footsteps leading down one empty hall. Following the trail, Rose came to a door left ajar at the far end. Pushing it slowly, apprehension grew as she found an office overlooking the whole ghostly cityscape. A desk had a lone journal opened on its final untouched page, dated years ago. With dread, Rose began to read the top entry. "Something strange is happening in our city. People have begun disappearing without a trace, leaving their belongings and cars behind. The police find no clues or signs of violence at the missing persons' places. All that is left is a thick choking fog rolling through the streets." The journal went on to describe the worsening phenomenon over months, more citizens vanishing each week with no explanations. Friends and neighbors started shunning each other in paranoia while the empty cars and homes piled up. By the final entry, total chaos seemed to be descending as the eerie mist consumed the entire panicked population. The writer expressed horror at being among the seemingly last residents trapped in this living nightmare. Their final message was a desperate plea for help before ink stopped marking the page forever. Rose felt faint at the tragic revelations, now understanding the city had been completely emptied of its people years ago by some unknown paranormal force. A loud crashing suddenly echoed up the silent stairwell, causing her to run with the journal clutched tight. She barricaded the office doors behind her and peered through its window towards the noise. At the bottom of the well, the foggy form of a figure dragged itself up the steps on mangled limbs, wailing in an unearthly manner. Rose backed away in terror, realizing she wasn't alone with the ghosts after all. Understanding her life was now in danger, Rose had to act quickly. This creature, and likely others, had been trapped here since the strange dark event overtook the city. With a plan forming, Rose returned to the electronics store base with her new knowledge. She gathered radios, batteries, and a megaphone to broadcast a message of help. That night, as the fog rolled in thicker than ever, Rose climbed a water tower for the highest vantage point. Flicking on the radios, their static chatter sounded unnaturally loud in the empty streets below. She took a deep breath before speaking into the megaphone. "If anyone alive can hear this, we must escape together before the fog returns to finish us off." Minutes passed with no reply in the muffling haze. Rose tightened her grip, ready to try something riskier. "To whoever or whatever trapped us all here, I challenge you to face me. Reveal yourself and release this city from your ghostly bonds." Her voice echoed angrily through the dense whiteness. Silence was the only response once more. Had Rose gone too far in provoking some paranormal entity? As doubt crept in, lights suddenly began blinking on across the darkened windows all over the dead city below. Shadows passed behind panes watching up at her tower. Then slowly, through the fog, figures emerged from alleys dragging their feet. Dozens of faces peered up slack-jawed, answering her call from their trance-like state of mindlessness. Their number grew until the streets below were filled with living shells that used to be people. An eerie ringing broke the silence as the largest building's roof started glowing with a strange blue energy. The mist swirled chaotically while the noise intensified into painful screams. Rose covered her ears and watched in horror as the roots of this curse were making itself finally known. A massive shadowy form began materializing from the wisps. Two piercing red lights shone from its misshapen foggy body as long twisting limbs reached out. An unearthly screech shook Rose to her core. She knew this was no physical force, but... Rose stared in horror as the massive entity hovering above the city let out another deafening shriek. This was clearly the source of the curse that had trapped everyone here. As the foggy abomination's red eyes glowed brighter, the crowd below started stirring with agitation. It was controlling their minds. The shadowy form let out a roar that seemed to say, "You dare challenge me, human?" Thinking quickly, Rose grabbed a radio and turned the dial, causing loud bursts of static to echo out. The entity reeled back in what seemed like pain or confusion. She kept changing frequencies to bombard it with interference. Down in the streets, the trance over the people was weakening as they covered their ears. Had Rose found a weakness in the otherworldly force? She risked speaking into the megaphone again, "Fight its power. Together we can be freed." As if waking from a deep sleep, the crowd started looking around in a daze. Their eyes then fixed on the monstrosity menacing the tower. An eerie moan rose from their throats, growing steadily into a shriek of collective rage and vengeance. The shadow entity recoiled, sensing its control slip away. Rose kept up the radio assault while the crowd swarmed the large building's base, shaking its foundations with their numbers and noise. Cracks began to appear in the foggy form as it thrashed and wailed. With an almighty groan, the entire roof collapsed in on itself. A shockwave blew out, dissipating the suffocating mist enveloping the city at last. Sunlight pierced through to reveal clear blue skies. The crowd cheered, embracing each other in joy at their liberation. Rose climbed down to a hero's welcome, overjoyed that her challenge had succeeded where all others had failed. Together they began to rebuild and repair the damage of lost time. While traces of what lurked in the dark fog still lingered, the ghosts of the past could finally be laid to rest. Rose was glad to have helped free the city and its people from the strange curse that had held them all for so long.